All right. I'm recording.
All right. I'm gonna record on my end, but I think it didn't record last time, so I don't know what's going on. We'll try it again and see if I get it this time since I'm in the actual app the right way. Okay, cool. It showed me recording. I don't know where the video went last time, so I'm like, did I not have enough space
Mm.
or I don't know, but I have more space. I have like 6 gigs of space now, so it should save. But you know. I guess we can start off wherever we want to start it, how you want to start it. Do we have a name for the show? Are we just here? Is this against the narrative? Is it an imperfect journey? Is it a collab? What are we doing still? So, what's going on?
It's a collab, man. I like that. I think we wanted to talk about the hero's journey and masculinity and femininity. And I think the best place to start is really just with the question of what is the hero's journey from your perspective?
So, from my perspective, when I think about the hero's journey, I think about the two first things that came to mind when we picked this topic was the major arcana and the tree of life. So like understanding that the story from the Fool to the world is a trip through the hero's journey. Like it's a story. And understanding how that story is told and each archetype in that story and how it's meant to be traveled is unraveled with the tree of life and the different paths on the tree of life representing these major arcana and also the Hebrew letter. So like when I get into metaphysics and why I like metaphysics is it gives me the map for these things. Like okay, so what is the hero's journey? The hero's journey technically is this story. What's the most well-written version of this story that you can pick up? To me, it is the mixture of understanding the major arcana as a story and understanding how to travel them through the tree of life and the different options you have on which way you travel these pathways.
Okay, can you break down the major arcana and the tree of life for me?
So the major arcana are the like, so you know how like you understand tarot cards.
Yeah.
So like in tarot cards, you have the like face cards. And so the face cards start with the Fool and end with the world. And it's a journey it's the journey of the Fool becoming the world and the different steps and lessons that you have to learn along the way to become everything. And so when you look at the tarot, you think, oh, they're just cards and they're trying to read people's future. It's like, nah, these cards were designed to tell a story. And so that's that part. And then when you understand the tree of life has 10 Sephiroth and 22 paths. The 22 paths between each one of these Sephiroth or circles up the tree are represented by one of the cards from the tarot. And so each path up the tree from Malkuth, which is where we are, to um, Hakma, the crown, are one of these different tarot cards. And so in order to transition from one of these spheres to the other, you have to understand this principle and move through it.
And then one more question. You mentioned moving from the full to the world.
Mhm.
What does that mean?
The fool, like the fool is like the jester or the joker,
Oh,
ideally.
got
And
you.
so the fool, so when you have the fool is like the base card. Some people call it the fool or the child. This is the beginning of the journey. And so the representation of the fool is somebody that has everything that he needs to be everything, but feeling as though he has to go seek it. So it's like this guy that's going off on a journey. He has a little bag on his back, and the little bag is supposedly everything that he needs. But instead of opening the bag and knowing how to use it, he's a fool going off to seek more that he thinks he needs.
And so from a psychological standpoint, anytime you're trying to engage in a new endeavor, whether that's starting a new job, starting a new podcast, or entering a new relationship, you are a fool
Yes,
because
you're
there's
embodying the full archetype in that journey.
hmm
And so this brings it to the hero's journey. Like this is the beginning of the journey. The beginning of all of the journeys, the main character or the hero is a fool. He is ignorant to his power and the thing he's about to embark on.
and the reason that the metaphysical lens through which you are explaining the hero's journey is important is because the metaphysical foundational symbolic layer is like a condensed version of human experience. Is that one way to think of it? It's a broad framework that uses different language because it is so broad, but once you understand it, you can apply it to, like I mentioned, those different domains wherever you're at some point A trying to get to some point B, which is the same thing as a journey, same thing as a story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so for me, it's all about being able to break down the problem. So in order for us to understand something entirely, we talk about the hero's journey and a lot of different things. A lot of people point to like the Enuma Elish, or they point to the journey to the West, or they point to these like archetypal cultural stories, right? But all of these stories are so ambiguous in the nature of what they're taught, like the wording and everything. When you really read these texts, they're hard to read. So, what's the easiest way to figure out this story? So, what I do is I just look through all the different versions of a thing, and I find the version of it that I feel like is the easiest to understand. And if you look at the tarot cards, it gives you 22 distinct points from that. So, the A to B becomes 22 points, 22 middle points, 22 milestones, and it gives you a better way of understanding the ups and downs of the journey without it just seeming like I start, I figure shit out, and I get there. Like, what is the figuring out part of it? What are the details of that? That's why I like having the metaphysical side because it gives you the infrastructure. It gives you like a step by step.
So before getting into the specifics of the hero's journey, I just want to make sure I understand where you're coming from. So, from one perspective, you can imagine that many of our religious and mythological ancient stories and fairy tales all have little bits of wisdom. They all have little bits of the hero's journey, maybe we could say. And one of the ways you can get at that wisdom is by reading all of the stories. And like you
Hmm.
mentioned, they're often told in forms that are hard to understand. They speak in parables sometimes, use just they use symbolic representations. And so it's very difficult sometimes to understand different stories from different cultures. But is it the case that when you see what's common across all of those stories, you get something like the tarot cards that you're mentioning?
Yeah, so for instance, when I look at any story now, I look at the characters in the story as which tarot card they're playing. You see what I'm saying? And so it gives me a lens for okay, so if this main character is the hero, so he starts off as the fool, who is he meeting on his journey and what is he learning from them? So you begin to look at the story as like, okay, so the hero's going on this journey and he meets these different entities or different characters along the way that are supposed to teach him certain things. And so what you begin to realize and what our major arcana allow me to do is to look at stories and to see what order they put the characters in and what the result of putting the characters in that order gets the hero.
And this enables you to make better predictions about your life, make better predictions for your friends around you, to offer advice, to help the individual orient themselves in their environment.
I use stories to train my discernment. Looking at a story and watching the hero go through a story and looking at it from the idea of trying to discern the contextual environment allows you to figure out how to practice. It allows you to practice how to navigate your environment. So if you can discern which person is playing which role in these stories, and then because you're looking at a story, you can see how it plays out. You can see how attaching to these different archetypes works for the hero in this story and what comes from that. And so it allows you to kind of think about how these different personalities play out in real life.
Okay. Now at this point, I think we can get into the specifics of the hero's journey. What's the first step in the hero's journey?
So contextually, the first step in the hero's journey would be, let me just make sure that I'm taking it from the, not just my perspective. And so it's like the separation or the departure. So it's like the start of the hero's journey. That's when the hero leaves or begins his journey. That would be the first step. And then there's always some sick. The step two would be, well, I guess we'll get into step one. So the step one is just him kind of beginning to step into a world that he wasn't familiar with almost. Like you
Hmm.
said, starting a new job, starting a new podcast, taking off on some new endeavor in life. Anytime that you get into the newness of something. And then in certain cultures, I understand this is like meeting Ganesh or getting into uh things with like Papa Legba or going to a crossroad where you have to make a decision on a new idea of yourself or a new pathway that you're walking on. It's like there's a lot of different references that are there when you get into like what a new journey looks like and how different cultures um define the experience of a new journey. But it always starts off with you meeting either a person or a force that represents something that inspires you to change.
And oftentimes that can be a negative emotion or a problem or a lack, right? Like
Definitely.
you're called to do something different because what you've been doing or the place that you've been at is no longer good or it's no longer helping you develop. And so you have to go find something new, right?
And that becomes the range of the hero's journey in itself. Is like, what is that initial fire? Was your family killed? Was the town you came from destroyed? Were you kicked out of some sacred place? Like, what kicks off this journey? You know what I'm saying? Because like even when we look at like the Bible, so what technically starts the context of what we know in the Bible was Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. That's the beginning of humanity's hero's journey as a whole. So what does that mean for us collectively? What are we trying to get back to? You know what I'm saying? These are the questions you begin to ask, and what does that look like on a grand scale?
All right, step two.
So step two is generally some type of initiation or a descent. So, basically the meat of the story. At some point the hero's ideals are tested. So the ideas that you started the journey with, that you kind of built your morality on, are tested and questioned in a way. So at some point in time, you begin to have to reassess how you think about life, and if the way that you think about life is keeping you from moving forward. And so that becomes what we know is like the initiation stage. So like a lot of people, this is like the spiritual awakening, or it's you ended up with a health problem that makes you have to change the way you look at how you take care of yourself, or what you grew up on, or what your family values should be based off of you just trying to live life for you know what I'm saying, in eternity. So it's like it's always just it's I tell people sometimes that we lack this in America. There's no rite of passage in American culture. Like I feel like the frat is a great rite of passage, you know, if you have the opportunity to get involved with something like that. But it's not something that's available to all men or women as they become adults. So it's kind of something we deal with at a workplace at some level, you know, in some experience that we had. And that would be kind of step two.
There's two points I want to bring up, and maybe we can go into the tangents, but one of them deals with masculinity and femininity and initiation rites. And I just finished this book called The Sacred and the Profane by Mircea Eliade, and he's a Romanian 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 historian of religions. And one of the things that he says is that across many ancient religious cultures, there was a difference in initiation rituals for men and women. And for women, their initiation rites were more associated with puberty and them getting their period and menstruation because for them that symbolized in its own way a natural change of values. Like
Hmm.
the woman was actually going through a form of death and rebirth where the change was drastic enough to shift the way that she looked at the world. And then they also had other customs, not just the biological, but for men, they had to symbolize that kind of death and rebirth because the change wasn't as, let's say,
Physical.
yes, right. And so I think that's something that potentially is still relevant in American culture. You mentioned the frat. I even think about the military. I do think that a lot of guys, a lot of men in particular, have a need for some kind of initiation. Like I feel like
Hmm.
they have a calling to figure out when they are shifting or changing from boyhood to, adult life or whatever it is. Like at what point I feel like men have this need to identify a stage change. And if they don't, it's almost as if I don't know, we prolong immaturity, maybe. Like there's no,
Definitely.
yeah. So that's one point. I'll let you riff on that if you have anything to say about that.
No, so I mean, I think that's the key here is that so ideally what we're talking about here is like in our first conversation we talked about getting in balance with natural order. So women naturally have an initiation that happens within their body physically. That's undeniable. It happens with them. It's in line with nature. It has to do with the moon. When you really get into the spiritual existence that comes with the feminine vessel, it's a lot deeper than the masculine experience. Masculine has to do a lot more. Mm, so the way that I was taught is that the female initiation happens in the womb, the masculine initiation happens in the mind. And so there's an idea that the man has to learn how to balance his mind and his heart. So there's this idea of like understanding, okay, as a young, like they say you let go as a man, you begin to when you become a man, you let go of childish things. Let me slow down. So when you become a man, you let go of childish things because there's this aspect that we go through. And at a certain point, I always ask is like, what's the sign that you should grow up? Like what is that actual point? Because having people say, oh, when you're 18 and you get all of these responsibilities, you should know that this is the time to make that decision. And it's like there's no actual thing for that. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no real if even like some people say like, oh, if you go to college or oh do this or this or that. And it's like none of all of these things are optional. You know what I'm saying? So what is the natural idea? And then when you look at astrology, you realize, oh, okay, well, the Saturn return happens at 30. So astrologically, you're going to go through something in your life in the first 30 years that's going to force you to consider how you think about things and whether or not you grow up. So understanding those type of clocks and things of that nature. So that's why I like feeling like you have to be able to zoom out a little bit. You have to be able to understand what cultures have already identified. Like there's a reason why mystery schools didn't allow you in until you were over 40 because astrologically you haven't matured yet. It's just part, and that's just the way the system works. So it's like, so for me, I believe that there is an underlying system that we can follow. And if we understood it, we wouldn't judge people the way that we do. I'll put it that way.
Hmm. And then the second tangent I wanted to bring up, we're still on step two, which is you refer to it as the descent,
Initiation.
right? The initiation.
Hmm. The descent or initiation, either one is
Got it, got it. Some form of death, perhaps, or like
yeah, like an ego
wrestling
death
with the
or shadow
dragon.
work. Yeah,
Okay. Yep, yep, okay. You mentioned how you can also conceptualize it as your values being challenged and hopefully changed to be more, I guess I'll say, adaptive. The thing about values is that's so crucial from a cognitive perspective is that we kind of touched on this in the first conversation. There's so much information in the world, and you only have limited attention. And so your experience of your world is to a large degree a product of the kind of attention that you pay to the world. Given that you have limited attention, in order to even see the world and then to act in it, you have to value some information in the world as more important or salient than others. So when you're saying values there, to me, what I started thinking about was really your embodied experience. Your very perceptions of the world are predicated on your values and the things that you believe are more salient or less salient. And so to have your values challenged is daunting to say the least and anxiety provoking. And it's one of the reasons why many people don't like to do that. We see that in our political discourse. So you could see that anywhere, maybe even in sports conversations. People don't like to have their values or beliefs, maybe that's another way of thinking about it, challenged because it really exposes you to the the interface of your reality, which is one of the images you sent before, this idea that just like when you're playing a video game, you're engaging, or let me use a simpler example. When you're on your desktop and you click on an icon and you're trying to go to Google, when you click on the icon, the website opens up. That's your user interface. All you see is click, the thing opens up. But really, there's a software, there's a hardware, there's so much complexity going on, but you're blind to all of that. And that's fine because you don't need to see all of that. But when you're dealing with the notions of truth and what is real, you have to understand that you are really dealing with an interface. And why did I bring that up? When your values are challenged, you're reminded of how little you know. And so that's one reason why it's daunting and why people are afraid to go out and do something that challenges their values.
definitely. Like, and so to bring up the point that you brought up just then, the presentation that I sent you was talking about how software engineering taught me metaphysics. And so when you look at there's a principle of software engineering called abstraction. And abstraction pretty much means like, hey, if I want to put a whole bunch of different breeds of cat in my software, I shouldn't build out every individual breed of cat with having four legs and this, that, or third. I can bring in the principles of a cat. Cats have four legs, they're furry mammals, this, and that, and build it into an abstract version of a cat. And then for each breed of cat, I can just put what makes that breed of cat unique and overlay it over this abstract class. And so basically it makes the computer work with less data. But this is important in metaphysics because it allows you to be able to look at things from an abstract perspective. And what it does for me is it's like you said, it's an interface. A lot of reality we're dealing with is an API. It's just the interface. And so you don't need to understand the software behind it to interact with it. Like you don't need to understand how gravity works to stay down on the ground, basically. And so a lot of times what happens is when we have these conversations about really growing and changing our values, we're attached to the perception of this thing as it is. And so in our code, we have to rewrite everything in order to make room for this abstracter version of the concept. And so what we end up realizing, did I not raise my hand? But so in the abstract version of the concept, so we get into these abstract versions of concepts. And so just to make a long story short, a lot of times what we end up doing is because we're attached to our programming and it takes a lot of like bandwidth to reprogram or to change things, we end up missing the point in how we grow and how we do things because we're afraid of having to rewrite our code. Because it makes us this idea psychologically. I've realized that a lot of people deal with this concept like, well, if I change how I think, that means I was wrong, and I don't want to be wrong, so I'm just going to fight to defend what I believe because it's easier than me changing and being wrong. Because it means that me being wrong unlocks all these situations where I argued this point, and I made a fool of myself now, and I don't want to have to take all of that back, so I'm just not going to do
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure people would understand
it.
this in their intimate relationships all the time. But you could also imagine it in many fields where people should supposedly know better, like science. There are many scientists who for decades have attached themselves to a certain belief system that has greatly reduced the complexity of their experienced world, but there is evidence for its faultiness, and that's everything. Every belief system that humans have to some degree is going to be faulty because there's just so much reality and there's only so much us. And so tying this back to the hero's journey, what I like about the conception of it is it's a process and it's not static. It's you can imagine that people might be seeking paradise, or we could think of it as the best value hierarchy or the best belief system. But it might not be the case that there's ever really a static, perfect framework of knowledge. It's more so that you are always transforming your values, and the process of transformation is what enables you to be more adaptive, not necessarily sitting still. And so there's like an optimal rate of transformation that you want. You never want to be sitting still. You're in too much order, things are rigid, you're never learning. But if you're always learning so fast and always changing your values, then you're what? Becoming too entropic. There's no boundary that actually separates you from reality and distinguishes you as a being. And so there's that balance of chaos and order that you want that I think the hero's journey represents.
So what I think, and so that what you said is a powerful point because the realization really here is once you realize that getting to the end of the journey isn't the point. Because the end of the journey begins you back as the fool on a new journey because you've now understand that mission, you've learned that thing, you've embodied that lesson, and now you're on to something new. So if you keep rushing to the end, you're gonna always be in a hurry. But when you begin to enjoy the journey and take the journey step by step and embody it with depth, life becomes a constant thing that you enjoy. And so that's the principle for me is with the hero's journey and why it's important is we don't like the end of the story. We're sad when the story ends. We enjoy the chaos. So learning to enjoy the chaos in your personal life, learning to enjoy the ups and downs of your personal life are important. That's why I like One Piece. Luffy's having a ball. Luffy is having a ball. It doesn't matter how bad things are. We gonna catch this fade. We gonna eat, and we going on to the next place. This is what we're doing. This is life. This is freedom and what it looks like. You see what I'm saying? Like that's for me how we get into that.
Yeah, that was good. Okay. That was the initiation, the descent, the battle with the dragon, the ego death. That was step two, right? So what's the next step?
So the breakdown I have is three steps. So this is the last step, is the return. The journey is over until the hero begins that growth back home.
Hmm.
So it's like it's all about just that return. It's the reflections with the people that you've met along the way. And like usually in this journey, he ends up backtracking through all the places that he's saved, either with the power to help them or seeing the results of his help that he did along the way and receiving the fruits of his labor as he journeys back home a lot of the time. And so what you understand about this in real life is this is that moment where it's like everything looked like it was gonna get bad, and you get to that point where like, oh, I get it now. I understand like, and now everything that was a problem is now a blessing. This is the turnaround in your psychological state, in your metaphysical state. And so a lot of times we realize like you have this thing where you're like, the best way I can exemplify this is when you have that bill that you know you gotta pay and you ain't got the money for it and you don't know where the money gonna come from and you're working real hard for it and nothing seems to be working. And then like the day before the money pops up. And then you have that day to like pay the bill and go get what you want to eat because now you have the money to do what you need to do. These little moments in life are those small turning points that I realize. And so that's a point that most people have experienced in life. And they scale up and down in your life based off of what type of journey you're on and what type of work you're doing. And so
Okay.
I think it's just our ability to really understand what that looks like and understand that it's something that comes naturally in the journey when you are allowing the journey to progress.
I think that's key there. There's a voluntary element to the hero's journey, or at least there should be. When you, or here's another way of thinking about it, maybe. The journey is going to happen one way or another. You're going to get called because you're going to have some problem. You're going to have your values challenged. Now, whether or not you return, well, I don't know. Maybe you still also return no matter what. I'm thinking in the ultimate example of, let's say, a failure of the hero's journey where you don't solve the problem and you actually die. Well, that's still, in some sense, a return to nature. That is in some sense, even a spiritual return. And so it's as if the journey is always happening, whether you want it to or not. But there is a difference between voluntary contention with the journey and involuntary when you're being forced to deal with it. And from a psychological standpoint, we there's this experiment where if you have one rat that's running on a wheel and you have the contraption set up so that every time rat A runs voluntarily, rat B runs involuntarily, you can measure their physiological metrics after so many iterations of them running. They got the same stressor, right? The same aerobic stimulus, but rat A voluntarily was running and rat B was involuntarily running, and rat A is actually healthier and rat B is less healthy. And so that mindset and that attitude of voluntarily in a form of humility, understanding that you aren't everything that you could be and that your values are imperfect and what you are trying to aim at is bettering yourself. I think that that choice is crucial.
So I think what you're talking about is a very powerful point because this is why I like being able to sit it with multiple different beliefs because it allows you the way to process what we're talking about here. So in essence, what we're saying here is that most of the time, most people don't get to the return. Most people are stuck in the descent. And how does that work? So like if you look at Hindu belief, you understand that if you get to your descent and you refuse it, you die, you end up back in the karmic loop, you come back again and you try the same test. So that opens up the path to what happens with that. It's technically you don't get through it. You end up dying because you forget your I believe that people's inability to make a psychological change leads to a physical death, whether it's through a medical reason or through some instance that you put yourself in physical harm. So this is where we look at the game without this. There's not this is looking at life without the baby lens on. Like this is the I taught this grown man conversation because it's like this is we're not I'm not trying to make you believe anything, but like realistically, like what's going on here? If there is a system at play, how does it operate? This is how I believe it operates. I believe that you go through certain lessons and you continue to repeat a lesson if you fail it until either your body, mind, or soul breaks. If one of those things break, you end up, if your mind breaks, you end up insane. If your body breaks, you end up dead. If your soul breaks, you end up unmotivated. And so you end up in a state that requires you to heal to continue to move forward. And so some people get stuck in this perpetual state of being broken in some form or fashion. Unfortunately, I look at life like this is kind of like a school. I believe that this system repeats and your soul is training to become better. So that just kind of puts a small idea of kind of how I look at things. But that's what I think about that. I think that we end up looped if you don't decide to change. But I believe you get a lot of chances before you end up looped, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I think maybe we could tie in masculinity and femininity at this point. Maybe starting with femininity, focusing in on the descent. Now, my understanding is that from many ancient religious narratives and from many mythological perspectives, femininity is associated with chaos, with creation, with death and rebirth, and with nurturing and generation, really associated around the feminine ability to give birth. And that experience gets, particularly in many primitive societies, that gets extrapolated to describe many different phenomena in the world. And so um, some ancient myths have it that the sun is a masculine god that illuminates the world, and it's associated with consciousness and culture and rationality to a degree. And as the sun is setting, it gets devoured by the dragon of the underworld, the whale dragon or the serpent, the that's characterized as feminine. And after the descent, if the sun god is able to successfully reemerge, then everything's good and the day is fine. But the sun rising is then thought of as the rebirth of the new hero. And so I don't know if any of that jives with you, but that's kind of one way I would enter into discussing femininity and masculinity in relation to the hero's journey.
So I like the way you brought that in there because what you really just did is you gave us the hero's journey in masculine and feminine. Because you think about it, that's what you did. So the sun is the fool. It rises, it goes through its thing, it gives light to everybody in the world. It's swallowed by the feminine, it's swallowed by the dragon, and then it goes through its dark, it goes through the descent, and then the return is it being birthed again. So this is the hero's journey. And so what does this mean? And so for me, the first question you ask is what is the feminine? So for me, when I think about the feminine, I think about wisdom. Because we look at from the tree of life, the feminine nature is wisdom. It's been that. And so when you look at that, what else comes with that? So you look at wisdom, and also we get darkness. But most importantly, we get the receptive end of nature. Women are the receiving end. The womb is a receiving thing. You see what I'm saying? And then you get into the masculine, which is the phallic, which is a expressive, it's a giving thing. And so that's the way I kind of look at that. And so when you look at it from this nature, why is the snake considered eating the sun? It's receiving the sun. You see what I'm saying? This is still, and this is kind of like how you let the metaphysics show you in all of these places. Do these principles hold up? Yes, because they're true in whatever instance you look at it. So the notes I have here show that the feminine is the receptive end. It feels first, it responds and reflects, it sustains and nurtures, it connects and experiences, and it blends and integrates.
I I keep having the image of the Disney movie Sleeping Beauty come to mind.
Mm.
I don't know if you like the classic Disney movies, but the theme
I'm a
of
Kingdom Hearts kid, so
oh okay. Actually, okay, yeah. Well, wait, is Maleficent Sleeping Beauty?
Maleficent, yeah, it's all in all the seven princesses are all in Kingdom Hearts. So
Right, right. Okay, okay. I need to go refresh myself on Kingdom Hearts then, because I'm sure these themes are there as well, which is why that game is so amazing.
it's
And
great.
oh, man, we can actually go into
That's another
that.
episode.
Like I believe that these patterns, these archetypal patterns are so profound to us and we see them, we just don't know them. That's why people love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Kingdom Hearts. All the great anime shows have these themes and they speak to us at a deeper level. But uh, one archetypal expression of the feminine, maybe you can even say the negative aspect of the feminine is Maleficent, and she turns into a dragon. And
Hmm.
it's funny how no one really questions that. It's just like, yeah, obviously she turns into a dragon. Like that's what she does. That's,
But
it's
okay,
yeah.
so let's look at the root of the story. Who's the Dark Mother? The Dark Mother is Tiamat. Tiamat had 12 children. 12 children are the Zodiac. Okay, let's look at it another way. Who's Sophia? Sophia is the 13th, what's the word? The 13th Archon. She's representative of wisdom. She also birthed Yaldabaoth, who created the 13, what we know to be Zodiac in the 375 days and what we know to be angels. He's considered the demiurge or the god in the biblical text, was the son of Sophia. And so, archetypically, all of these stories are telling us the same thing. Because what did Sophia turn into? A dragon. And so, let's get into the archetypes of dragons. What are dragons? Dragons, metaphysically, are supposedly phoenixes at a lower dimension. So, when a phoenix or when a great angel or something comes down into our world, it looks horrendous. That's why the angels depicted with eyes and all these different things. There's a concept here that when something from that dimension, when anything from a higher dimension drops down into this dimension, it becomes something that damn near describes as a dragon. It's a whole lot of fire, wings, and eyes involved. No matter what culture you look at, they look like dragons. That's what we get. Whether you say they're coming from space or a higher dimension or whatever, something in the human mind continues to tell this story. Why? What is it pointing at? Is there truth to it? Is it a physical thing? Is it a metaphysical thing? Is it something that our minds all experience? And so this is something I got into when I got into psychedelics. And you start looking at people's trip logs. And you're like, oh, so there's a side of society that has mapped out all the experiences that people go through when they get high. And not only are we all going through archetypically the same experiences, they seem to be telling us this hero's journey. So when you start studying triple logs, you realize, oh, wait, so the mind is programmed with the hero's journey. Okay, so science is telling us the DNA is programmed with a story. What story is DNA telling? Oh, it's the hero's journey. So we're archetypically programmed with this story. What is it for? Our minds will make the images up, even if we don't know the story. If you get high enough, your mind will show you the fucking story. People with or without the knowledge have the same experiences. So for me, that's where it gets interesting to me. Um, I think I lost the point of the masculine and feminine thing, but we're back in the hero's journey pocket. But still, that's we can go back into the masculine and feminine, but that's something I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, and I think I kind of derailed us because the just kind of expanding and clarifying for listeners what we think archetypes are. It's so difficult for me to explain it. I keep trying to practice it, but I never get it right. My notion of archetypes is really coming from Carl Jung, although he didn't invent the term. He has credited Plato with his idea of ideal forms. And so an archetype can be thought of as a universal pattern that is shared across the entire human race and gets passed down through the generations. Now, from a scientific perspective, some people will argue, well, ideas, images and narratives can't be inherited from a strictly Darwinian perspective, and that gets really technical. But just leaving it broad as this idea that we as human beings have been trying to survive for a long time. And we don't even have to stop with human beings if you're a Darwinian. You can go back as long as there's been life. You can go back, 3.5 billion years. Like a single-celled organism had to feed. It had to defend itself. It had to reproduce. So it had to act. And the archetypes, I think, can be thought of as general patterns of behavior that we inherit. They are also the substrate for our emotional systems. You can think of them as instincts, although they are not reducible to instincts. They aren't reducible to only your brain. They aren't reducible to only reflexes, but there's something They are general patterns. Another, okay, one last attempt is like the archetypes are think of them as the form of a stream or a river. Our experiences will take the shape of the archetypes. They will take the shape of the river, but the material content, the actual water and the soil and the rocks in the river as it's flowing will change. And so that's why when we are saying that there's an archetypal hero's journey, we can say that while also noting that it can manifest in different expressions, like you mentioned, Marduk and Tiamat, and we could talk about God in the beginning of time who, created order out of chaos, or, Jesus Christ, whatever hero you want to discuss. So that's my idea of an archetype. How do you think of an archetype?
So I want to bring up a point that you brought up where we talk about instincts. So I don't, I believe that we live in a reality that's divinely designed. I don't believe that whatever system that we're in is stupid enough to put us here without instructions. So our instincts are instructions. The thoughts that we have naturally, the ideas that we come up with that don't naturally seem like what we would think about, I believe our genetic code or our bodies are given what we call like our subconscious mind or a subtle programming that allows us to, over generations, embed the way that we think into our children in a subtle way. And so I don't care what nobody say. I am a product of my father. I know him well enough to know that I am unfortunately him with all of his flaws. But I've had experiences that allow us to now be at the point where we bicker because I know where he started at, that he hasn't changed. And it's an odd experience, and I'm grateful for it because I understand everybody doesn't have that ability. But it's interesting because I think we have to figure out how to navigate instinct. Like, how are we taught about instinct? How do we work with instinct? How does our mind navigate this topic? I don't think often enough we give credit to understanding that this is why I get into like the metaphysics with ancestral veneration and having this whole conversation because it's like, bro, we were raised on the shoulder of our ancestors, dude. We wouldn't have I live in an apartment. I don't know how to build an apartment. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? We live on the shoulder of our ancestors. And so at the end of the day, the knowledge that we're given a small, I believe that everybody's born with instruction manual. I believe that instruction manual is not something that you have to learn in a school. I believe that if you grow up and if you pay attention and you observe reality, your mind will put together the pieces. I believe that's what meditation does. I believe that's what observing nature does. If you sit outside and you watch animals and shit, you pick up something. Same way our ancestors figured out how to fight and different things from observing animals. Like we know how we got here. And so we know that we don't have to do those things because somebody figured it out at some point in time. So we don't have to go watch the animal. We have this and that step that automatically unlocks. So like when you understand Kung Fu, what does Kung Fu do? Kung Fu teaches you how to manage your chi. So now we don't have to go observe animals because somebody has already taught us the forms. Yoga, same thing. Like we have these systems that unlock this code now. So we understand that there is a way to like, there's certain things you can do with your body that you would end up doing naturally without thinking about it if you were just outside fucking around that unlock certain thoughts and ideas. So that's what I think. I believe that archetypically, when we talk about archetypes, these archetypes are things that unlock certain ideas in the human mind. So when you experience or see these things in action, you from experiencing the archetypes, it unlocks certain information and thought forms in your mind. That's what I think about archetypes. So it's not necessarily a certain thing or presence. It's just seeing certain principles at play activates certain ideas in the human mind or allows the human mind to expand instinctively.
And part of what that implies, I think, is that there are aspects of our environment that have not changed.
Yeah, because they're natural. Like think about nature, like trees and like bro, like you said, a river is not changing. Rivers is going river, bro. Ocean is going ocean. Mother Nature has not changed, and all the archetypes are within her bosom. This is the mother, the womb, Gaia. The dark mother is all. This is a womb. We live in a womb. The planet is a womb. And in that womb are all the principles needed for creation.
I'm gonna lob one more thing up, and then maybe we get back to masculinity and femininity. But I like this tangent though. So I've read some academics and researchers who believe that our current environment with its technological advancements and our sociological shifts as well have changed so much that we are no longer in the same environment, let's say, compared to our ancestors, I don't know, 50,000 years ago. And I think that to some degree, that's true. But I think that's a more surface level thing. I think that there are, how do I say this? I think that the, okay, I think that both humans and the environment are changing, but I think that there are fundamental levels that do not change. And I think that there are at the surface things that apparently change. Um, okay, you go.
So let's talk about the descent of humanity. So if humanity is on a hero's journey and we started off in nature, living with nature and together with nature, what is our descent? Our descent was into masculinity. So we've built a masculine world on top of a feminine. Look at our world. It's boxed. It's aligned in degrees. And so so let's get into the conversation about masculine and feminine here. Masculine is straight lines. Feminine is curved. Ideally, when we talk about shapes and geometry, look at how we build. Modern houses now were what? They're box shaped. What were the old huts? They were circular. Our psychology has changed from feminine to masculine. The way we work with nature is masculine, not feminine. You see what I'm saying? And so, what is the return? The return is us slowly looking at the world now and realizing that this kind of sucks. It's a little too rigid. We can't get a point across because nobody's fluid enough. Nobody's going with the flow. No one is circular. No one's embodying the whole thing. Everybody stops at we're getting caught at every corner. You see what I'm saying? And so when you begin to look at these metaphors and understanding how the thing works, this is the problem here. Is that we've built a masculine society on top of a feminine planet and feminine principles. We're out of order with nature. That's going back to the balance thing.
If you don't mind, can I try to lay out the story of Marduk to try to flesh out the feminine? And then when we turn to masculinity, maybe we can use the story of Horus and Osiris. Because as you were talking, in my mind, and this really comes from Jordan Peterson, who was influenced by people like Carl Jung and Mircea Eliade, when I think of feminine, I think nature.
Hmm.
And nature has a positive and negative element. Nature destroys, kills, disease, it creates disease, all of that, but it also creates. And so
Hmm.
both of those aspects are feminine. And
It's a
then
balanced system.
the balance is right. And then you can take that balance system and mesh it together with masculinity, which would be associated with culture. And culture also has positive and negative elements. Like you said, you're in an apartment. That's a product of culture, right? Like
Hmm.
culture is in some sense, and this is something that Camille Paglia talks about, opposes nature, right? Or you can think of it as opposing nature or offering a resistance, protecting us from nature. But so that's a positive element of masculinity and culture. But like you also mentioned, it can become too rigid, too much of a square, too straight lines. And so now you don't get the creative power from nature because you are too opposed. And so both masculinity as culture and femininity as nature have positive and negative elements. And that's kind of my paradigm for thinking about these concepts.
Yeah, so the idea here is, and so this is how I separated to make sense. So all things are dualistic in nature. So masculine and feminine are two sides of this dualistic paradigm here, right? And so, but each side of the paradigm can be balanced, in balance or out of balance. And that's how we kind of separate that. So nature in balance creates, nature out of balance destroys. Masculine or culture in balance creates. It's beautiful. It creates new cultures, art, things of that nature. Culture out of balance destroys, war, separation, civil rights, things of that nature, oppression. So these are the same principles and everything. And so that's why I look at masculine and feminine the way I do. And so, like for instance, when I was looking at the masculine and feminine conversation, let me bring up one of these things. I just want to make sure that I have all the points right. So, like I said, I like breaking down things in seven sciences so we really get a good view of it. And so we look at masculine and feminine. I brought it down into seven different things. So biologically, we have male and female. Energetically, we have positive and negative. Philosophically, we have yin and yang. Cognitively, we have left brain and right brain. Celestially, we have the sun and the moon. Decisionally, we have logically and emotionally. And then engagement wise, we have either a goal or a process. These are the two sides of all of these different things. But so when you look at it like that, you're able to look at masculine and feminine as two parts of the whole. Like they have the two sides of the same coin. Anything that you can break into twos technically has now a masculine and feminine nature. It's dualistic. And so we live in a dualistic reality. So everything in this reality can be broken into two sides at some level. We're even symmetrical as beings. So this world builds things that are dualistic in nature. So like understanding that paradigm just allows you to understand that one, everybody has two sides, and both of those sides need to be balanced for you to see what you're actually looking at. And we live in the real, and so nature, but when we realize that nature is feminine and feminism is correlated with chaos, we realize that most of the time feminine nature is in a chaotic state. It's actually balanced for feminine to be chaotic. Like nature is chaotic, like you said. If you gonna die, you don't know what you like. Being in nature ain't easy. Like living outside is not easy, nigga. It's not fun to be out in nature. And you got to deal with the weather. You got to. It's not. It's chaotic. But that's feminine because but look at all the things that are created when things are allowed to just do whatever they need to do to get by. We wouldn't have what we have now if it wasn't for that chaos.
Hmm. Right.
And so this idea that chaos is a bad thing is what really is. So what we're into realizing is that society, because we live in a masculine society, we have demonized chaos. So we've demonized the feminine. Based off of what we do with the church, psychologically, the church has cut out the feminine. We can have that conversation on so many different levels. But religion and psychology has cut out the feminine nature. Even when we talk about the Trinity, we talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the feminine. It's levels to it. So so as a society, we've cut out the feminine nature. We've made chaos a bad thing. We want order. Anything outside of order brings us fear and anxiety. And so, because we don't know how to deal in chaos, we treat it as if we're separate from chaos or if we're better than chaos by nature. We don't embody a part of ourselves that's natural. And that's what causes disbalance and disorder in the system.
Would you agree that femininity is more associated with multiplicity and masculinity is more associated with unity?
I believe the feminine multiplies the masculine orders.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So masculine brings things together more, and femininity differentiates. Uh,
So basically, let's put it this way: if the man enters the woman, she multiplies. So the woman's job is to receive and multiply. If I give her money, she should make more money. If I give her a house, she should make a nicer house. These are the principles that we have in society with a lot of people when we talk about like the masculine and feminine traditional dynamic of what it was. A lot of times when if you give a woman kids, if you give a woman things, she will make your life better because she's gonna take the things you give her and multiply it because she knows how to care for things and make them better. This is the principle here. She receives and multiplies. So whatever you give her, she will make better. She will grow it. She will make a garden if you give her seeds. This is the principle here. The same thing with Mother Earth. If you give her seed, she will grow it. If you give her, you feel what I'm saying? Whatever you leave here, it will grow. It will get into something. It will become something. She will use it. Even your dead body, she will use. You see what I'm saying? Like the mother is going to receive whatever you give it.
mhm. I think maybe we have our first point of disagreement here. You mentioned that. So if I understand correctly, you see that we in our current culture have a misunderstanding of chaos where we only see it as bad, and we have this want for order, and perhaps we have too much of an attachment to order.
Let me
To
clarify that a bit. I believe that what we see as chaos everywhere in the world is we subconsciously want chaos, so we consume chaos in media because we've separated from it. Does that make more sense?
I I think so. There's from a psychological view from Freud and psychoanalytic perspective, essentially what doesn't get addressed consciously will express itself some way unconsciously.
So I believe we obsess over chaos in the world because we suppress it in our own personal experience.
You know, I think I see the opposite, but that doesn't mean both can't be happening. We
Yeah,
could
I
be
mean,
all kinds of
I
messed
think
up.
I think all dreams are true depending on the perspective. So it's just like my perspective of it. I see a lot of people that like when I look at like the grand scheme of like society, I believe we're overcoming this. Like I don't believe I believe that's the age we're coming out of. Let me make this more clear. Like I believe what we're going into now is more accepting of the feminine and the chaotic and things of that nature. But I believe mm, I believe the return of society was. I believe that what we're going through now, as we're coming into this return phase, coming out of what I believe was the last dark age or the dark space that we're at in a culture. I believe that. So, like I said, the Catholic Church cut off the feminine at the Council of Nicaea a long, 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 long time ago. That created the society, the depth that we're in now. So we were swallowed by the feminine because we rejected the feminine psychologically, and we're coming into the knowing of the feminine now. And so that age that we're coming out of was an age of chaos. Like you think about all the war, everything that we've been through over the last couple of years in society is a result of a disconnect or an imbalance of the feminine energy in society. And as we're beginning to integrate it back in, we're beginning to understand and realize and see those differences.
Let me offer you an alternative from the political landscape. I think that Trump represents order,
Definitely.
masculinity. And I think that the reason, at least,
Well, I guess that. Well, go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish.
I think the reason, at least in the most recent election, that he won was because a majority of voters, let's say, felt that there was too much chaos, which I guess is this might be what you're saying. But again, I think that like we've been saying, chaos and order both have positive and negative elements. And I think part of what I'm wrestling with is just trying to really put a boundary around what is considered pathological femininity and pathological chaos. Like, so here's one example, right? Like, I'm sure you remember the Me Too movement.
Hmm.
we, Consciously, in our collective consciousness, we all said that women shouldn't be sexualized, that men shouldn't uh, utilize their male gaze and sexualize women and believe all women, right? We said that collectively in our collective cultural consciousness. Now, around that same time frame, what else was going on? Porn was escalating. Oh, porn's always been a thing, but obviously porn is still a huge industry. You also had 50 Shades of Grey, the book, come out in a movie, I think around that same time, and
Hit.
was a hit. And so to me, I see that I saw that as consciously we were trying to impose order on this feminine element, and many people went along with it again consciously, but in the shadow, it was like, nah, you want like you know what this really is like, and so we're trying to talk out of two sides of our mouth, two sides of our neck. I don't know what the saying is, but we're struggling to find that balance. And again, I don't know if I'm necessarily disagreeing with you. Like I think we are very confused about what the proper balance between masculinity and femininity is. And so it's
So
manifesting in all these different ways.
definitely, and that's really what the conversation. So in society, we have confused the line of what. So I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna bring another point. So first, I want to say that I do. Damn, I kind of lost my point. But so I believe psychologically we have. By nature, we are sexual beings. Like by nature, we want to have sex. We want to multiply. I don't care who you are, what you got going on. You might not have met the person that gets you right, but whoever, when you find it, you're gonna be on that. So it's just a matter. So regardless of what you want to argue, we are sexual creatures. Yes, some people over sexualize, but there's an excess of anything. You know what I'm saying? And so in an idea, masculine, like I said, masculine brings in the order. So at the end of the day, we do need to check the shit that's just too much. Like that's why the Me Too me moving the thing. Like there is like, bro, come on, like, dude, back off, shorty. Like, what's going on with you? Like, niggas is wild. But on the other side. we can't argue that there is an aspect of that that is human nature. Have you seen how animals get around when it comes to that? Like, it's not cordial all the time. You know what I'm saying? And so understanding the natural way of that and us trying to balance it is to bring order to it so that it's not, so people don't feel comfortable in their experience. That's our goal more so than it's like, I believe we can try to control things too much. And that's an overbalance of the masculine. So when I say like we live in a masculine reality, we live in a world that tries to overly control the results of what's going on. We don't allow enough flow in our psychological state, so we live in a state of anxiety because we're too pressed for things to be a certain way.
Yeah. And
So we're not allowing enough chaos in because we want order. That's more so what I'm saying.
yeah, I think in academia, maybe we go
I,
back to the political landscape. I'm sorry, do you have something else?
I just want to say I probably got like 15, 20 more minutes before I got to move around, but we can keep going.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry about that. But yeah, finish
There
your
you
point.
good. I'll give okay, one more political thing, and then maybe we didn't
We
explicitly touch on masculinity, but I feel like we kind of hit it from multiple angles. And so I'll give this one more political flair on it to try to, I guess, give an example of mapping our metaphysics onto something that impacts people that's more, I don't want to say practical because it's not obvious that politics is practical, but I guess something more shallow uh, and simple to a degree, at least compared to what we're talking about. So when I look at the right, I see order. Again, looking at Trump. And that's not to say it's a good thing, because we've consistently said it, that both order and chaos can have their negative elements and they also have their positive elements. So when I say that, I look at the right and I see order. I'm not saying that, oh, that's great and perfect. You can have too much order. And honestly, that's part of what I'm more afraid of now coming up. But anyway, and then when I look at the left, I think of multiplicity. I think of chaos. I I don't know, how much you maybe attended to, I guess, the past 2 years or the campaign in 2024. But I think part of what hampered the left was that they have too many multiplying groups that call for attention. You have the um, LGBT group that's continuously multiplying. You know, you have the supposedly they're for the poor, but I guess that's fine. And then you have the feminists, and then you have the Marxists, and you have to some degree Islamists, and it goes on. Like there's when I look at the left, I see it as more feminine because they're more multiplicitous. And I think part of the tension in the 2024 election was many voters felt like this is too much. Like why is it that I feel like I'm being canceled for so many things? Like why is our language changing so much? Like why is it that there are 50 different pronouns now? I thought there were only two. Like what and so I think many people felt like the landscape was shifting from underneath them. And that's kind of why I guess that's why I make the association between chaos and multiplicity and femininity, and then mapping that onto at least part of what I think we're seeing in our culture.
And so when I listen to that, what I think about is this, like, okay, so 2 points. One, realize that on the tree of life, the feminine body has a masculine head and the masculine body has a feminine head. So when you say that you feel like Trump's side is order, I can agree with that because I feel like Trump is a chaotic head. He is chaos. He is the idea of chaos. He's just going to shake everything up so his team can put it in the order they wanted it. That's the principle there. You see what I'm saying? And so when you look at the other side, they're just trying to accept everybody and everybody's belief. But separation causes dysfunction. And so that's what you realize is wrong about their strategy. Instead of bringing everybody together under one umbrella, they want everybody to have their little slice of cake. And it ain't, you can't order that. There's too much going on. That's chaos. Chaos is like, you gotta think about nature is one thing. This is all nature. As soon as you try to break down the individual pieces of nature, it don't work no more. It's not you can't you have to look at the entire system. So chaos has to be a whole operating thing. It can't just exist. You can't you can't take a little bit of chaos and think it's gonna stay balanced. You got to take the whole thing for it to stay balanced. Like that's why the mother is like big. She's pregnant. She's boisterous because she's embodying the entire world. She's carrying everything inside of her in one thing.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
So, no,
Just
agreed.
like Big Mom. Like you think about okay, so like think about the feminine is more like a. Are you familiar with like, having Big Mama in like in the country? How you had that old grandmama that everybody go to her house and eat. That's the feminine. Yes, it's chaotic at Big Mama house, but you can eat, you can sleep. Ain't nobody gonna come over there bothering you. That's the principle here.
Hmm.
So it's a controlled chaos.
Hmm. Hmm. It
The feminine balances this chaos. She understands it. She's empathetic to each part of it, so she knows how to guide and to rear it and to make it into something that's valuable.
right. The feminine. I feel like what you just described is the feminine at its best.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
in balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it. And like you mentioned
These can
in.
be in or out of balance. So when you look at what we see as the political parties, they're generally the representations of these things out of balance.
Hmm. Hmm. I love it. Okay, to try to close up though, tying the hero's journey and masculinity and femininity, my understanding is that the masculine components of the feminine or the masculine components of the hero's journey are associated with the goals. I think you mentioned that in your image where you're at point A, your goal is point B. And so those 2 points, those two stationary points would be potentially, I guess, associated with masculinity and the process and the movement forward, particularly associated with the descent and contention with the dragon, that would be more so the feminine component, which is, like we've been saying, the destruction and the rebirth if it's successful. Um, and then obviously, when you get to your point B, if you return, that just becomes a new point A.
Mm.
And so the journey is a process that's punctuated by accomplishing certain goals, but there's always a grander goal.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is like, okay, so you said the masculine is the goals. So the masculine is the motivation, it's the drive, it's what's motivating you to go do the thing. So it's the logic, it's the mind, and then the feminine is the process. It's the emotion that you're going through while doing the thing. How are you changing through this process? How is you going from point A to point B changing you? That's the feminine. That's why the feminine can rebirth. That's why going back to the point you made earlier about the period and the rebirth. The feminine can rebirth itself. It can go through this process of depth and rebirth. So your emotions, your logic can go through that cycle, and then your mind is just directing you where to go through this emotional process. And so this is the hero journey in the masculine and feminine nature, is that the masculine wants to go somewhere, the feminine needs to grow. So the masculine protects the feminine, so the masculine carries the princess or he goes gets the princess and carries her back. He's taking the princess out of a scary situation and bringing her into somewhere safe, whether it's in his internal emotions, in his childhood ways and growing out of that, or whether it's a physical princess that he's protecting from a beast or saving from somewhere or taking on this journey with him and protecting her.
I think that's it, man. I think that's it. Any concluding remarks, any practical applications? I really think one of the biggest things we hit on was the voluntary component of engaging in the hero's journey and how part of what can pathologize the hero's journey or your experience of the hero's journey is the involuntary component of it or the kind of shrieking back from change because of whatever reason, your fear of change or your over attachment to your preconceived notions. I think for me that was something that's crucial.
So I like that. I want to add on one more point. I believe the point of the hero's journey is to remind us that courage in facing our problems is what gets us through the journey. I think that's the biggest thing that the hero journey. So, what is the principle of a hero? A hero is somebody that we believe is strong and confident, and somebody that goes after saving the world or whatever principles that are driving them. And so, I believe that sometimes when we look at the hero's journey, we forget, like you said, that you have to want to participate in this. You have to be a willing participant in life, and especially in your life, if you want to progress or be better or to grow as a person. And so, the more that we are able to find stories that inspire us to get after it, and the more versions of the hero's journey that we're able to understand and digest, the better we're motivated to be good people.
That's it. Perfect way to end it.
Definitely. I enjoyed the conversation, dog. We maybe we'll do maybe we'll do a full build on masculine and feminine for real next time because the hero's journey, like we touched a lot of masculine and feminine principles here, so I think the people can get what they want from it, but we may touch on it a little bit more.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, boss man.
All right,
Be
dog.
easy. Have a good day, man. Stay safe out there.
Take it easy.